The notification from our bank account came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I only saw it because I'd been up late finishing a presentation for work, my phone buzzing with what I assumed was another spam email. Instead, it was an alert for a transaction I didn't recognize, $899.99 withdrawn from our wedding savings account. My heart stopped. Jake was asleep next to me, snoring softly into his pillow, completely oblivious to the fact that I was now wide awake and staring at my phone screen like it had just delivered news of an alien invasion. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and planning our wedding for what felt like an eternity. Every penny in that account had been carefully saved, budgeted, and allocated for our dream day in October. I refreshed the banking app 3 times, hoping it was some kind of error. The transaction remained stubbornly real. GameStop. Electronics, $899.99. GameStop. At 7:32 p.m. yesterday. While I was at my book club meeting, discussing whether the protagonist in our monthly selection was making morally questionable choices, the irony wasn't lost on me. I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, needing space to think. Our wedding fund had been sacred. We'd opened the joint account 6 months ago with a ceremony that felt almost as important as our actual engagement. We'd each put in our initial contributions, set up automatic transfers, and made a pact, wedding expenses only, and only after we both agreed on the purchase. The account balance showed $12,847.23. It should have been $13,747.22. I knew because I'd checked it obsessively every few days, watching our dream wedding slowly become financially feasible. I made coffee with shaking hands and sat at our small kitchen table, staring out at the pre-dawn darkness. There had to be an explanation. Maybe someone had stolen our account information. Maybe it was fraud. Maybe Jake had bought something for the wedding and forgotten to mention it. Though what wedding-related item would come from GameStop, I couldn't fathom. But deep down, in the part of my stomach that felt like it was slowly filling with concrete, I suspected the truth was much simpler and infinitely worse. The coffee tasted like betrayal. When Jake's alarm went off at 6:30, I was still sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, having spent 3 hours going through our account history with the dedication of a forensic accountant. The GameStop purchase wasn't the only irregularity. There had been other transactions over the past 2 months that I'd somehow missed. $67 at Best Buy, $45 on Amazon, $156 at some place called Tech Paradise. All relatively small amounts that hadn't triggered my attention during my casual balance checks. "Morning, beautiful," Jake said, shuffling into the kitchen in his boxers and an old college t-shirt. He kissed the top of my head and reached for the coffee pot. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, which was technically true. He poured his coffee and sat across from me, finally noticing my laptop screen. "Working already? It's not even 7. I turned the laptop toward him. "Jake, what's this?" He squinted at the screen, and I watched his face carefully. The moment he saw the GameStop transaction, something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition, followed immediately by what I can only describe as the look of someone who's been caught red-handed but is frantically calculating whether they can still talk their way out of it. "Oh," he said. "That. Yes. That." I kept my voice level. "Want to explain what wedding-related expense required a $900 purchase from GameStop?" Jake set down his coffee cup and ran his hands through his hair, a tell I'd learned to recognize over 4 years together. He did it when he was stressed, when he was lying, when he was trying to buy time to construct a response. "Okay, look," he said finally. "I can explain." The concrete feeling in my stomach solidified into a block of ice. "I'm listening. You remember how I've been really stressed about work lately? The promotion thing, all the overtime, dealing with Morrison breathing down my neck constantly?" I nodded. Jake worked in IT for a mid-sized company and had been pushing for a promotion to team lead for months. His boss, Morrison, was known for being demanding and generally unpleasant. Well, I've been having trouble sleeping, trouble focusing. I kept thinking about how I needed something to help me decompress, you know? Something to take my mind off everything. So you bought a gaming console. With our wedding money. Without telling me. It's the new PlayStation 5 Pro, he said, as if the specific model somehow justified the theft. And it's not just for gaming, it's for stress relief. For my mental health. I read articles about how gaming can be therapeutic, how it helps with anxiety and… Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop talking for a second. Jake's mouth snapped shut. I took a deep breath, trying to process what I'd just heard. You spent almost $900 of our wedding savings on a gaming console for your mental health. Without discussing it with me first. I knew you'd say no, he said quietly. Of course I would have said no. That money is for our wedding. But that's exactly why I knew you wouldn't understand, Jake said, his voice taking on a defensive tone. You're so focused on the wedding that you can't see anything else. I'm struggling here, Sarah. I'm having a really hard time, and I needed something to help me cope. I stared at him. Are you seriously trying to make me the villain in this scenario? I'm not trying to make you a villain. I'm trying to explain that sometimes there are more important things than a wedding. The words hit me like a physical blow. More important than our wedding. The wedding we've been planning together. The wedding that represents our commitment to each other. It's just a party, Sarah. The silence that followed those words was deafening. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the tick of the clock on the wall, the distant sound of our neighbor starting their car. But mostly, I could hear the sound of something fundamental breaking between us. Just a party, I repeated slowly. Jake seemed to realize he'd crossed a line. I didn't mean it like that. I meant, no, I think you meant exactly that. I closed the laptop. Tell me about the other purchases. Best Buy, Amazon, Tech Paradise. His face went pale. You went through all of our transactions? It's my money too, Jake. Our money. So, yes, I went through our transactions. What did you buy? For a moment, I thought he might continue trying to lie. But something in my expression must have told him that ship had sailed. Gaming headphones, he said quietly. A new controller. A gaming chair. How much total? Including the console? Including everything. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Finally, about $1,300. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. $1,300. Nearly 10% of our entire wedding budget spent on gaming equipment. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. $1,300, I said. Jake, that's the entire cost of my wedding dress and alterations. That's our photographer's deposit and our cake combined. I stopped, realizing I was about to cry, and I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I know it seems like a lot, he said quickly, but think about it logically. A wedding is one day. One single day, Sarah. But this gaming setup? I'll use it for years. It's actually a better investment when you think about it from a cost-per-use perspective. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. A better investment than our wedding. From a purely practical standpoint, yes. Get out, Sarah. Get out of the kitchen. Get out of my sight. I can't look at you right now. Jake stood up, his coffee mug still half full. Where am I supposed to go? This is my apartment too. I don't care. Go to work early. Go to the gym. Go play your new PlayStation that was more important than our marriage. I don't care where you go, but you need to not be here right now. After he left, I called in sick to work. I spent the morning crying, then the afternoon making phone calls. First to the bank, to understand our options for the joint account. Then to my sister Emma, who listened to the whole story without interrupting once. What are you going to do? Emma asked when I finished. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to transfer all the remaining money into my personal account. Part of me wants to just cancel the wedding entirely. And part of you wants to work it out with him?
I was quiet for a long time.
The scary thing is, I don't think I do. The way he talked about our wedding, it's like it means nothing to him. It's just something he's going along with, because it's what I want. Maybe he was just defensive, because he knew he was wrong. Maybe. But even if that's true, he still stole from me. From us. He made a major financial decision without consulting me, using money that we explicitly agreed was off limits for anything but wedding expenses. And then when I confronted him, he tried to justify it by saying our wedding isn't important. Those are some pretty big red flags, Emma said gently. I keep thinking about what other decisions he'll make without consulting me. What happens when we're married and he decides he needs a new car for his mental health? Or wants to take a guy's trip to Vegas using money we've budgeted for a house down payment? How can I trust him with any joint financial decisions after this? Have you considered couples counseling? He'd have to actually think there's a problem for that to work. And based on this morning's conversation, he thinks the only problem is that I'm being unreasonable about my priorities. When Jake came home from work that evening, I was waiting in the living room with a notepad covered in calculations and a printout of our wedding budget. How was your day? He asked cautiously. Educational. Sit down. He sat on the opposite end of the couch, as far from me as possible, while still technically sitting on the same piece of furniture. I spent today figuring out what your gaming purchases actually cost us, I said, consulting my notes. The $1,300 you spent? That's not just $1,300 out of our wedding budget. Because of your purchases, we now have to make cuts elsewhere. I showed him the printout, covered in red ink. We can't afford the upgraded dinner package anymore, so we're back to basic chicken and fish. We can't afford the premium bar service, so it's beer and wine only. We have to cut the dessert table and stick with just the wedding cake. The upgraded floral arrangements are gone. The string quartet for the ceremony is gone. We're back to a single pianist. Jake looked at the list, his face growing paler with each item. But here's the really fun part, I continued. Even with all those cuts, we're still short $400. So either we need to cut more things from our wedding, or we need to come up with additional money somewhere else. I can return some of the stuff, he said quietly. Can you? The console's been opened, used. Most stores have pretty strict return policies on electronics. And that's assuming you actually want to return your mental health investment. He flinched at my tone. Sarah, I'm sorry. I really am. I made a mistake. What mistake, specifically? I shouldn't have used the wedding money. What else? I shouldn't have bought the stuff without talking to you first. What else, Jake? He stared at me, clearly struggling. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to say that you understand why I'm upset. I want you to acknowledge that you betrayed my trust. I want you to take responsibility for prioritizing your wants over our shared goals and commitments.
Okay.
I betrayed your trust, and I prioritized my wants over our shared goals. You're just repeating my words back to me. Because I don't know what else you want. His composure cracked, and suddenly he was angry. Yes, I screwed up, okay? I made a bad decision. But you're acting like I committed some unforgivable crime. It's money, Sarah. We'll make more money. It's not about the money, Jake. It's about trust. It's about partnership. It's about the fact that when you were stressed and needed something to make you feel better, your solution was to steal from our future together. I didn't steal. You took money that wasn't yours to take, without permission, for personal use. What would you call that? Jake was quiet for a moment. Then, I would have paid it back.
When? How?
We're already stretching to make our current savings plan work. Where was this mystery replacement money going to come from? I don't know. I would have figured it out. You would have figured it out. Just like you figured out that spending our wedding money on gaming equipment was a good idea. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Jake said, "What do you want me to do?" I want you to understand what you did wrong. Really understand it, not just say the words I want to hear. I took money from our joint account without asking. I know that was wrong. Why was it wrong? Jake looked frustrated. Because it's your money too. And because we agreed to only use it for wedding expenses. And I don't know what other and you're looking for, Sarah. I realized with crystal clarity that he genuinely didn't understand. He saw this as a procedural violation. He'd broken a rule about account usage. He didn't see it as a fundamental betrayal of trust and partnership. Jake, when you made that purchase, what went through your mind? I was tired and stressed, and I saw the console was finally in stock, and I wanted it. I wanted something that would make me feel better. Did you think about me at all? He was quiet. Did you think about our wedding? About the fact that money represented months of careful budgeting and saving? About the fact that we'd made a commitment to each other about how that money would be used? I thought about it afterward, he said quietly. Afterward. You thought about your fiancée and your commitments to her afterward. I knew you'd be mad. Mad, Jake. I'm not mad. Mad is what you feel when someone cuts you off in traffic. This is so much deeper than mad. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where couples were walking their dogs and families were loading groceries from their cars. Normal people doing normal relationship things, probably without having to have conversations about financial betrayal and broken trust. I feel like I don't know you, I said without turning around. The person I agreed to marry would never have made that purchase. The person I've been planning a future with wouldn't have justified it the way you did. And he definitely wouldn't have called our wedding just a party. I was defensive. Were you lying? What? I turned back to face him. When you said our wedding was just a party, were you lying to hurt me because you were defensive? Or were you telling me what you really think? Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. The pause before he answered told me everything I needed to know. I think weddings are kind of overrated, he said finally. I love you, and I want to marry you, but the whole big wedding thing, it's never been important to me the way it is to you. Then why didn't you say that 8 months ago, when I was showing you venue options and asking for your input on centerpieces? Because you were so excited about it. I didn't want to ruin that for you. So, instead you decided to just go through the motions while secretly thinking the whole thing was a waste of money. I didn't say it was a waste of money, but you did say a gaming console was a better investment. Jake rubbed his face with his hands. I don't know how to fix this, Sarah. I don't know what you want from me. I want you to want to marry me. Not just be willing to marry me, not just go along with marrying me, because it's what I want. I want you to be excited about promising to spend your life with me. I am excited about spending my life with you, but not about promising it in front of our friends and family. Not about the commitment ceremony itself. You're excited about the relationship, but the wedding is just something you have to endure to get there. Jake didn't answer, which was answer enough. And I want you to be trustworthy with money, I continued. I want to know that when we make financial agreements, you'll honor them. I want to know that you won't make major purchases without consulting me. I want to be in a partnership where we make decisions together. I can do that, he said quickly. The money thing, I can absolutely do that. This was a one-time mistake. Was it? What about all the small purchases before this? The headphones, the controller, the chair? Jake's silence stretched long enough that I had my answer. How long has this been going on, Jake? How long have you been spending our wedding money on gaming equipment? The first purchase was about 6 weeks ago, he admitted. The headphones. I told myself it was just once, just a small amount, and I'd pay it back before you noticed. But you didn't pay it back.
No.
And then I saw the controller on sale, and it was only $60, which seemed like nothing compared to what we'd already saved, and it snowballed. Yeah. I sat back down on the couch, feeling exhausted. Jake, I need you to understand something. This isn't about the money. It's not even about the gaming equipment. It's about the fact that you've been lying to me for 6 weeks. Every day that you didn't tell me about these purchases, you were lying to me. I wasn't lying. Lying by omission is still lying. Every time I mentioned the wedding budget, every time I talked about our savings goal, every time I got excited about hitting a milestone in our account balance, you knew the real numbers were different from what I thought they were. You let me believe things that weren't true. Jake stared at his hands. I kept meaning to tell you, but you didn't. And instead of telling me, you kept spending. The purchases got bigger, not smaller. You went from $60 impulse buys to a $900 console. That's not the pattern of someone who's feeling guilty and trying to come clean. That's the pattern of someone who's gotten comfortable with deceiving their partner. I'm not comfortable with deceiving you, Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then why didn't you feel sick to your stomach every time you made one of these purchases? Why didn't you lose sleep over it? Why didn't you confess the first time, or the second time, or any time before I found out on my own? He didn't have an answer. We sat in silence for several more minutes. Outside, I could hear kids playing in the street, their laughter filtering through the windows. It felt like hearing sounds from another planet. I think I need some time, I said finally. Time for what? Time to figure out whether I can trust you again. Time to figure out whether we want the same things. Time to figure out whether we should still be getting married in October. Jake's head snapped up. You're calling off the wedding? I'm considering it. Sarah, no.
Don't do that.
We can work through this. Can we? Jake, you've been lying to me for weeks. You've shown me that you don't value the same things I value. You've demonstrated that when push comes to shove, you'll prioritize your immediate wants over our shared commitments. Those are pretty fundamental problems. But I love you. I know you do. And I love you too. But love isn't enough if we can't trust each other, and if we don't share the same values. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then, what would it take? For you to trust me again? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on processing what had happened that I hadn't really thought about what would need to happen next. I honestly don't know, I said. Complete transparency with money, obviously. Full access to all accounts, all purchases discussed beforehand, no matter how small. But Jake, that's just the practical stuff. The bigger issue is that I need to believe you actually want to be married to me, not just living with me with a legal document. I do want to be married to you. You want the relationship we have now to continue. But marriage is supposed to be different. It's supposed to be a deeper level of commitment, of partnership. The wedding isn't just a party. It's a public declaration that we're choosing each other permanently in front of everyone who matters to us. If that doesn't mean anything to you, then maybe we're not ready to be married. Jake looked stricken. The wedding does mean something to me. Does it? Or does it mean something to you because it means something to me? Again, his pause before answering told me everything. I want you to be happy, he said quietly. That's not the same thing, Jake. I want you to be happy too, but I also want you to want to marry me for your own reasons, not just because it will make me happy. I stood up again, suddenly feeling claustrophobic in our small living room. I'm going to stay at Emma's for a few days, I said. I need space to think. For how long? I don't know. What about the wedding planning? We have the final cake tasting next week, and we need to confirm the catering numbers by Friday. The mundane wedding tasks felt surreal in the context of our conversation. I'll handle the cake tasting. As for the catering numbers, let's put that on hold until I figure out what we're doing. I went to our bedroom and packed a bag while Jake sat on the couch, not moving. When I came back out with my suitcase, he looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not quite panic, but something close to it. Are we breaking up? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time to figure out what I can live with and what I can't. Can I call you? Give me a few days first. I kissed his forehead, a gesture that felt both familiar and foreign, and left. Emma's spare bedroom became my thinking space for the next 4 days. She didn't push me to talk when I didn't want to, didn't offer advice unless I asked for it, and kept a steady supply of tea and tissues available. On day 2, Jake started texting. Nothing dramatic, just small updates about his day, apologies, and requests to talk. I didn't respond, but I didn't block his number either. On day 3, he sent a longer message. I've been thinking about what you said, and I realize I never really thought about why I want to marry you beyond just loving you and wanting to keep being together. I always figured that was enough. But you're right that it's supposed to be more than that. I'm trying to figure out what marriage means to me, not just what it means to you. On day 4, Emma found me sitting on her back porch with my laptop, researching the return policies for gaming equipment. Whatcha doing? She asked, settling into the chair next to me. Trying to figure out if Jake can actually return any of the stuff he bought, I said. Turns out most stores have pretty strict policies about open electronics, especially gaming consoles. He might be able to return the accessories if he has the receipts and original packaging, but the console itself? Probably not. So, you're thinking about working it out with him? I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. I don't know. Maybe. The financial part we can figure out. We'll have to make cuts to the wedding, but it's not insurmountable. The trust part is harder. But not impossible? I keep going back and forth. One minute I'm thinking about how good our relationship was before this happened, how much we've built together, how maybe this was just a really bad mistake that we can recover from. The next minute I'm thinking about that look on his face when he called our wedding just a party, and I feel like I don't even know him. Emma was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Of course. If he hadn't spent the money, if you'd never found out about any of this, do you think you would have had doubts about the wedding anyway? The question hit me like a lightning bolt. I sat with it for several minutes, really thinking about it. That's the scary part, I said finally. I don't think I would have. I would have walked down that aisle completely convinced that we both wanted the same thing, that we were both equally excited about getting married, that we were both fully committed to building a life together as equal partners. And now you know that's not true. Now I know that Jake sees marriage as something he has to do to keep me happy, not something he actively wants for himself. And I know that when he's stressed or wants something, his first instinct isn't to talk to me about it. It's to just take what he wants and deal with the consequences later. Those are pretty fundamental incompatibilities. Right? Like, even if we work through this specific incident, what about the next time he's stressed? What about when we're dealing with real adult decisions like buying a house or having kids? Will he just make unilateral choices and then try to justify them afterward? Emma nodded thoughtfully. Have you talked to your parents about this? God, no. My mom would have a complete meltdown. She's been planning this wedding almost as much as I have. She already ordered her mother of the bride dress. But maybe that's part of the problem, Emma said gently. Maybe you're so invested in having the wedding, and everyone else is so invested in it happening, that it's hard to separate what you actually want from what you feel like you should want. I stared at her. Are you saying I shouldn't marry Jake? I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that sometimes when we're in the middle of something big like wedding planning, it's easy to get caught up in the momentum and lose sight of whether we're doing it for the right reasons. That night, I called Jake. Sarah? He answered on the first ring. Are you okay? I'm okay. How are you? Terrible. I miss you. The apartment feels wrong without you here. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. If I hadn't found out about the gaming purchases, would you ever have told me? The silence stretched so long that I started to wonder if the call had dropped. Jake, I'm here. I'm thinking. That shouldn't be a hard question to think about. I want to say yes, but honestly, I don't know. I kept telling myself I would, but I also kept not doing it. At least he was being honest. Okay, next question. Do you actually want to get married, or do you just want to keep me happy? Another long pause. Both. That's not an answer, Jake. I want to marry you because I love you, and I want to spend my life with you. But you're right that the wedding itself, the actual ceremony and everything, that's more important to you than it is to me. And you're okay with that? You're okay with going through with a big ceremony that doesn't mean much to you personally? If it makes you happy, yes. But what if it doesn't make me happy anymore? What if knowing that it's just something you're enduring for my sake makes the whole thing feel hollow? Jake was quiet for so long that I started to think he might have hung up. I never thought about it that way, he said finally. I need you to think about it now. Because I can't marry someone who's just going through the motions. I need to marry someone who's choosing me, actively and enthusiastically, not just someone who's willing to marry me because it's easier than breaking up. Sarah, I am choosing you. I do want to marry you. Then prove it.
How?
I don't know. That's something you need to figure out. We talked for another hour, covering the same ground we'd covered in person, but somehow making more progress. By the end of the call, we'd agreed that Jake would try to return whatever gaming equipment he could, that we'd postpone any major wedding decisions for another week, and that he'd think seriously about whether he actually wanted to be married or just wanted to avoid disappointing me. One more thing, I said before we hung up. Yeah, I need you to understand that this isn't just about the money or even about the wedding. This is about whether we're compatible as life partners. Whether we can trust each other with big decisions and shared goals. Whether we actually want the same things out of marriage and life together. I understand.
Do you?
Because if we get back together and get married, and then in 5 years you make some other unilateral decision that affects both of us, I don't think I'll be willing to work through it again. This feels like our one chance to figure out whether we're actually right for each other. I get that. And Sarah? I know I screwed up, but I want to fight for us. I want to figure out how to be the partner you deserve. After we hung up, I sat in Emma's guest room for a long time, trying to imagine what our life together would look like if we worked through this. Could I ever fully trust him with money again? Could I believe that he actually wanted to be married to me? Could I get past the image of him calling our wedding just a party with such casual dismissiveness? On the other hand, we'd built something together over 4 years. We'd supported each other through job changes, family crises, and all the ordinary ups and downs of adult life. We made each other laugh. We had shared interests and values, or at least I thought we did. And up until a week ago, I'd been completely confident that he was the person I wanted to spend my life with. The next morning, I called our wedding planner and told her we might need to postpone. She was surprisingly understanding. Apparently, it happens more often than you'd think. The good news is that most vendors will work with you on rescheduling if you give them enough notice, she said. The bad news is that October dates are popular, so if you do decide to go forward, you might be looking at next spring or summer. What about canceling entirely? What would we lose? Depends on the vendor. You'd probably lose the deposits, but most of the big expenses haven't been paid yet. After I hung up, I realized that the thought of losing our deposits didn't fill me with the panic I'd expected. If anything, I felt a strange sense of relief at the idea that we might not have to go through with the wedding after all. That scared me more than anything else that had happened. When I went back home that afternoon, Jake was waiting with a pile of receipts and packaging materials spread across our dining room table. I can return the headphones, the controller, and the gaming chair, he said without preamble. The console, the store says no returns on open items, but they might take it as a trade-in for about 60% of what I paid. That's something at least. It's not enough though. Even if I return everything I can and trade in the console, we're still short about $400 for the wedding budget. I sat down across from him at the table. I talked to our wedding planner this morning. Jake's face went white. And we can postpone if we want to. Most vendors will work with us. We'd probably be looking at next spring or summer for a new date. Do you want to postpone? I don't know. Do you? Jake stared down at the receipts in front of him. Part of me thinks maybe we should. Not because I don't want to marry you, but because I think I need time to figure out how to be a better partner before we make that commitment. I wasn't expecting that answer. What do you mean? I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few days, and I realize I have some growing up to do. The money thing is just a symptom of a bigger problem. Which is, I make decisions based on what I want in the moment, without really considering how they affect you or our relationship. I did it with the gaming stuff, but if I'm honest, I do it with smaller things too. I make plans with friends without checking with you first. I buy groceries without asking what you want. I choose what we watch on TV without seeing if you have preferences. I realized he was right. Those things had never bothered me enough to bring them up, but there was a pattern there. I think I've been treating our relationship like I'm still single, but just happen to live with someone I love, Jake continued. But marriage is supposed to be different, right? It's supposed to be a true partnership where we make decisions together. Yes. I don't think I know how to do that yet. I think I need to learn before we get married. I felt a strange mix of hope and sadness. Hope because Jake seemed to finally understand the real issue. Sadness because understanding it meant acknowledging how far we had to go. How long do you think you need? I asked. I don't know. Maybe 6 months? Maybe a year? However long it takes for both of us to feel confident that I've actually changed, not just promised to change. We spent the rest of the afternoon calling vendors and postponing everything. Most were understanding, though we did lose a few deposits. By evening, our October wedding was officially off the calendar. How do you feel? Jake asked as we sat on the couch afterward. Relieved, I admitted. Which probably says something important.
Yeah.
Me too. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, and for the first time in days, the tension between us felt manageable rather than overwhelming. So, what happens now? Jake asked. Now you return what you can return. We figure out how to rebuild our savings, separately this time, I think, until we're both confident we can handle joint finances responsibly. And we work on learning how to be actual partners. Are we still engaged? I looked down at my ring, a simple solitaire that Jake had picked out with my sister's help. I think we're taking a step back. Maybe we're pre-engaged? Figuring out if we're ready to be engaged. Jake nodded slowly. That makes sense. And Sarah? Thank you. For what? For not just walking away. For giving us a chance to figure this out. I thought about it, I said honestly. There were moments this week when I was sure we were done. What changed your mind? I thought about it for a moment. I think it was when you said you needed time to learn how to be a better partner. That was the first time in this whole mess that you took real ownership of the problem instead of just apologizing for getting caught. I meant it. I really do want to learn how to do this right. Good. Because we're going to need couples counseling. And probably individual therapy too. Already looked into it, Jake said, pulling out his phone. There's a therapist about 10 minutes from here who specializes in premarital counseling and financial conflicts in relationships. I called yesterday and left a message. I stared at him. You already called a therapist? I figured if I was serious about wanting to fix this, I should start taking concrete steps instead of just making promises. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt genuinely hopeful. The next few months were harder than I'd expected, but not in the ways I'd feared. Jake did return the gaming accessories and traded in the console, recovering about $650 of the $1,300 he'd spent. He got a second job working weekend shifts at a local electronics store to make up the difference, insisting that he wanted to personally replace every penny he'd taken from our wedding fund. The therapy sessions were intense. Our couples counselor, Dr. Martinez, had a way of asking questions that forced us both to examine assumptions we'd never questioned. Why did I need a big wedding to feel secure in our relationship? Why did Jake make unilateral decisions when he was stressed? What did partnership actually mean to each of us? Individual therapy was even more revelatory. I realized that some of my attachment to having a perfect wedding came from wanting to prove to my parents, and maybe to myself, that I was successful at relationships in a way my older sister had struggled with. Jake discovered that his habit of making impulsive decisions was connected to growing up in a household where he'd learned to grab opportunities quickly before they disappeared. We kept living together, but we opened separate savings accounts and started splitting expenses more deliberately. Every purchase over $50 had to be discussed first. Every social commitment had to be cleared with the other person. It felt awkward and formal at first, but gradually became natural. The hardest part was dealing with everyone else's reactions to postponing the wedding. My parents were devastated, though they tried to hide it. Jake's mom kept asking if we were sure we weren't just getting cold feet. Friends didn't know whether to offer congratulations for working through our problems or condolences for postponing our wedding. Are you happy? Emma asked me one evening in December, 3 months after we'd called off the October wedding. We were having dinner at her place, and she'd been watching me pick at my food while telling her about our latest therapy session. That's a complicated question, I said.
No, it's not.
Are you happy? I thought about it honestly. I'm hopeful. I think Jake is really trying to change and I can see progress. But am I happy? I don't know. I feel like I'm in limbo. How long are you willing to stay in limbo? As long as it takes, I guess. But Emma, what if we do all this work and I still don't trust him completely? What if we get to next summer and I'm still checking our account balance obsessively? What if I can never stop waiting for the next time he lies to me? Then you'll have your answer. What if he does everything right from here on out, but I just can't get past what already happened? Then you'll have that answer too. By February, we'd made enough progress that Dr. Martinez suggested we start talking about concrete plans for the future. Not wedding plans. We'd agreed to wait until we'd been working on our issues for at least 6 months before making any big commitments, but life plans. Where do you see yourselves in 5 years? She asked during one session. Married, Jake said immediately. Hopefully in a house instead of our apartment. Maybe starting to think about kids. Sarah? I want those things too, I said. But I want them with someone I trust completely. Someone who sees me as a full partner, not just someone whose feelings need to be managed. Jake, how do you respond to that? I think I'm getting better at the partnership thing. I check in with Sarah before making decisions now, even small ones. I ask her opinion about things. I think about how my choices affect her. You do, I agreed. But sometimes it still feels performative. Like you're following a script of how partners are supposed to behave, rather than it coming naturally. Jake looked hurt. I don't know how to make it feel more natural. I'm trying to change ingrained habits. Of course it feels forced at first. Dr. Martinez intervened. Sarah, it sounds like you're worried that Jake's behavioral changes aren't reflecting real internal changes. Is that accurate?
Yes.
I want to believe that he's genuinely becoming more considerate and partnership-minded, not just that he's learned to go through the motions to keep me happy. Jake, how do you respond to that concern? I don't know how to prove that my changes are genuine except by sustaining them over time. But Sarah, some of this is on you too. You have to decide at some point whether you're going to trust me or not. That's fair, I admitted. I know I'm probably being overly scrutinizing. But Jake, you broke my trust in a pretty fundamental way. It's going to take time for me to rebuild confidence in your decision-making. How much time? I don't know. That night, Jake and I went for a long walk around our neighborhood. It was one of those crisp February evenings where the air is cold enough to see your breath, but not cold enough to be miserable. Can I ask you something? Jake said as we passed the park where we'd had our first official date 4 years earlier. Of course. Do you think you'll ever fully trust me again? I was quiet for a long time, watching our breath create small clouds in the cold air. I want to, but honestly, I don't know. Some days I feel like we're making real progress, and I can imagine getting back to where we were. Other days I catch myself wondering what else you might be hiding from me. I'm not hiding anything else. I believe you, but the fact that I even wonder about it shows how much damage was done. We walked in silence for another block. What if we can't get back to where we were? Jake asked quietly. Then maybe where we were wasn't as solid as I thought it was. That's not what I meant. I meant, what if we can't get back to that level of trust? What if this is just something we have to live with? I stopped walking and turned to face him. Jake, I won't marry someone I don't fully trust. I can't build a life with someone if I'm always going to be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. So, if you decide you can't trust me again, we're done? Yes. The starkness of that answer seemed to surprise both of us. How long do I have to prove myself? Jake asked. I don't know. There's no timeline for rebuilding trust. But Jake, you can't spend the rest of our relationship trying to prove yourself. At some point, either I'll trust you or I won't. Either we'll be partners or we won't. And if we're not, then we'll both find people we're more compatible with. That conversation marked a turning point. Over the next few weeks, I noticed Jake seemed more relaxed, less like he was walking on eggshells around me. When I asked him about it, he said that knowing there was a potential end point to the uncertainty actually made him feel less anxious. I was starting to feel like I was going to be on probation forever, he explained. But knowing that you'll eventually make a decision one way or the other means I can focus on just being myself, the better version of myself I'm trying to become, instead of constantly performing trustworthy partner for you. Meanwhile, I found myself paying less attention to his every move and more attention to how I felt about our relationship overall. Without the pressure of an upcoming wedding, I could evaluate whether I was happy with Jake for who he was, not who I hoped he would become. By April, 6 months after the GameStop incident, we'd both noticed significant changes. Jake had developed genuine habits of consultation and consideration. He asked my opinion not just about purchases, but about how to handle work conflicts, social invitations, even what to cook for dinner. More importantly, he seemed to actually want my input, not just feel obligated to ask for it. I had started to relax my hypervigilance around money and decision-making. I still checked our account balances regularly, but out of normal financial awareness rather than fear of discovering new betrayals. When Jake mentioned wanting to buy new running shoes, my first thought was about whether it fit in his budget, not about whether he was lying to me about his motivations. I think we're ready to start talking about getting engaged again, I told Emma over lunch one Saturday. Really?
How do you feel about that?
Cautiously optimistic. We're not the same couple we were last year, but I think we might be a better couple. Better how? We communicate more directly. We make decisions together instead of just assuming we're on the same page. Jake seems more genuinely invested in building a partnership, not just maintaining a relationship. And you trust him? I thought about it carefully. I trust him to be honest with me about money. I trust him to include me in decisions that affect both of us. Do I trust him never to make another mistake? No, but I don't think that's a realistic standard anyway. What about the wedding? Still want the big party. You know what? I think I do, but for different reasons now. Last year, I wanted a big wedding to prove something, to show everyone how happy and successful our relationship was. Now I think I wanted to celebrate actually becoming partners. The wedding feels less like a performance and more like a graduation ceremony, I guess. That evening, Jake and I sat down for one of our regular relationship check-ins, a habit we'd developed in therapy. How are you feeling about us lately? I asked. Good. Really good, actually. I feel like I know how to be a good partner now, not just a good boyfriend. What's the difference? A good boyfriend tries to make you happy and avoids making you upset. A good partner thinks about how his choices affect both of us and makes decisions that are good for our relationship, even if they're not necessarily what he wants in the moment. Give me an example. Last week, when Marcus invited me to that weekend camping trip, old me would have either said yes immediately and then told you about it, or would have said yes and then tried to convince you it was a good idea. New me talked to you about it first. We figured out that it conflicted with your sister's birthday party, and I declined because being at Emma's party together was more important than a guy's weekend. And you didn't resent having to miss the trip? Honestly?
No.
I wanted to go, but I wanted to support Emma and spend time with your family more. That's what I mean about making decisions that are good for our relationship. Jake, I said, taking a deep breath, I think I'm ready to get engaged again. For real this time. His face lit up with a smile that was completely different from the careful, hopeful expressions I'd gotten used to over the past 6 months. This was pure joy. Really? Really? I trust you. I believe we want the same things. I think we've learned how to be actual partners. Can I ask you something? When you imagine marrying me now, how does it feel different from how it felt last year? Last year, I was excited about the wedding but nervous about the marriage. I was so focused on the party that I wasn't thinking much about what came after. Now I'm excited about the marriage. The wedding will be fun, but what I'm really looking forward to is being your wife, building a life together, making decisions together for the next 50 years. Jake reached across the table and took my hands. Sarah, will you marry me? Again? I laughed.
Yes.
But this time, we save for the wedding in separate accounts and transfer money into the joint account only when we're ready to make specific purchases.
Deal.
And this time, I want to be involved in the planning. Not just going along with whatever you want, but actually caring about the details because it's our day. Really? Really? I want to have opinions about flowers and cake flavors and music. I want to be excited about our first dance. I want to write vows that actually mean something to me, not just something that sounds nice. We spent the rest of the evening talking about what kind of wedding we wanted, and for the first time, it felt like a conversation between two people who were equally invested in the outcome. 6 months later, we got married in a small ceremony in Emma's backyard. It wasn't the wedding I'd originally planned. We decided that a smaller, more intimate celebration felt more authentic to who we'd become as a couple. Instead of 150 guests, we had 30. Instead of a formal sit-down dinner, we had a barbecue. Instead of a string quartet, Jake's friend played acoustic guitar. But it was perfect. When I walked down the makeshift aisle between folding chairs, Jake was crying. When he said his vows, which he'd written himself and practiced until he could recite them from memory, I believed every word. When we exchanged rings, it felt like we were promising to be partners, not just promising to stay together. During our first dance to a song we'd chosen together, Jake whispered in my ear, "This is so much better than just a party." I laughed and whispered back, "Best investment we ever made." Later, as we sat around Emma's fire pit with our closest friends and family, someone asked how we'd known we were ready to get married. "We learned how to fight productively," I said. and how to make decisions together, and how to trust each other with the important stuff. Also, Jake added, we learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for your relationship is postpone your wedding until you're actually ready to be married. Our friends laughed, thinking he was joking. But as I looked around at the faces of the people who mattered most to us, all I could think was how grateful I was that we'd taken the time to build something real before we promised to make it permanent. The GameStop incident, as we'd come to call it, had been the worst thing that ever happened to our relationship. It was also the best thing because it forced us to confront problems we didn't even know we had and learn skills we didn't know we needed. 2 years later, we still do monthly relationship check-ins. We still discuss every purchase over $50. Jake still asks for my input on decisions that affect both of us, though it's natural now rather than conscious. I still sometimes have moments of anxiety about money and trust, but they're brief and manageable. Most importantly, we both know that we chose each other deliberately, with full knowledge of each other's flaws and full commitment to being genuine partners. Our marriage isn't built on hope and assumptions. It's built on proven trust and tested compatibility. And every time I see a PlayStation in a store window, I smile and think about how lucky we are that Jake spent $899 on a gaming console. It was the most expensive relationship therapy we could have asked for, and worth every penny.